Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. In recent days, public debate has intensified over the land ownership and legal status of long-standing places of worship in Malaysia. At the centre of the controversy are questions about land rights, about historical occupation, as well as the role of authorities when religious sites predate modern land titles. So when legality clashes with history, which should prevail? And what principles should guide us as a nation when responding to it? So joining me on the show today to help us think this through is S Arutchelvan, Deputy Chairperson of PSM. Aru, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. The issue of temples without land ownership, that's a long-standing one, but I'm curious to know how you see this recent controversy, especially the ones that's happened this year. It's sparked strong public reaction. Aru, what do you see as, I guess, what this dispute fundamentally represents?
I think it's a very difficult topic because it touches on religion. You know, though all religion talks about peace, love, and all that, but if you look at what we are facing today, for me, you could say this is right-wing racism, okay, and the problem is as well as is magnified by social media, and there is extreme views in both sides within the Muslim community, within the Hindu community, and when today in the social media, you know, and I feel there's frustration in both parts. The Malays are frustrated, and the Hindus are frustrated, and then and in their respective WhatsApp groups, they do have some kind of discussion, and I'm in about 120 WhatsApp groups, so I get to hear both sides. It's sad because both sides are frustrated when for 60 years. I mean, we have been living as a nation, and these temples have existed over the years. So I think people are more stressed out today, lah, and
Okay.
social media doesn't help that much.
Aru, can you elaborate when you say that you're hearing frustration from what you're observing in public discourse and especially on social media? What underpins the frustration? How do you see, or what concerns you about the way this issue is being discussed?
Firstly, I think lumping every temple as illegal, and I think when you technically it's correct because when you're when your land doesn't belong to you, it means illegal. But then of course, people, this is about religion, about religion and beliefs. And when you say a temple is illegal, it hits fundamentally to the Hindus. And a lot of Muslims feel that the Hindus are robbing the land, robbing other people's land. And the Hindus on the other side feel that they have not been able to get places to build temples, to get permission to build temples, and so all these temples has history. And if you there's a question which goes around that how come all these temples have got electricity, water supply, if they're supposed to be illegal? Because every temple there is some politician involved. There's some politician who will help them give them water, electricity. Every election they come aboard, shake hand, and they say, "Don't worry, we will take care of you." So this is not really just a very simple question about right and wrong. We have to look case by case.
Right.
And
Arul, I agree with you. The use of the word illegal is very problematic. I mean, similarly, when people use the term illegal immigrants, no person, no human being should be deemed illegal, and no, places of worship should be also everything needs to be taken into context. And I'm curious to know, because the Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, he, I think, reiterated that Malaysians are free to build houses of worship as long as it is in accordance with the law. And I'm curious to know how you view this statement, and what we risk when we frame discussions like this narrowly in terms of legality without considering the historical and the community factors involved.
Yeah, what he says in a way is correct. Okay, everybody have to follow the legal way. Both sides can work on the same thing. Both sides can capitalize it and use it in their angle. In simple terms, in land, there's only two types of land. One is called state land, one is called private land. Every private land has to go to the court. If I'm squatting, even if you are Melissa, if you are renting, I'm renting your house. You can't just kick me out of my house, even though you are the owner of the house. So the law is such that you have to get a court order to evict people. And Malaysian courts have been considerate, and because Malaysian courts have recognized that when you go to the court will see whether you have stayed there for how long, whether you are merely a squatter or do you have a history behind it. So that is private land. So every private land should go to the court and let the court decide. But the other point is the state land. State land comes under state governments, local governments, comes under the Pejabat Tanah, district. And this lands are there, and this is where the state land, the district office can give notices. Now the question arises is, I'm very sure that the district office knows this temple. They know which temples are built in 2 weeks, which temples are built in 50 years, which temples are there for 100 years. Because no temples can be built overnight. So in a situation like that, so when you talk about legality, of course the district office has the legal means to give you a notice. But there's something else in law which is called given motivation, dorongan they say. For all these years, you don't evict somebody. You attend when they have festival, all the aduns and YBs go there, do all the ceremonies together. And then give them water and electricity, and then suddenly overnight you can't call them. So this is the issues. So we have temples who have been there for 100 over years. Temples were built in plantation land, which mainly built by plantation owners. It's not built by the estate workers. Plantation owners need to build temples to make sure that after all the hardship the workers go through, they got a place to go and pray or to rest. So all temples in many Malaysian temples are from the plantations. Then you have temples built beside the railway lines. There are many temples also built in hospital land, And if you ask the history, the temples are there first, and then the hospitals come. But they could coexist over the years, no issues. So every hospital has a surau. All this thing can coexist. There's no issue actually.
You raised an important point about the state jurisdiction or state purview versus federal purview, and there's a national committee that's been set up now to address land and legal issues of Hindu temples. I'm curious to know, Arul, if we do think about this at just a federal level, what are you hoping they prioritize? What are you hoping they essentially resolve?
See, firstly, land is a state issue, okay? And even if you have anything at the federal level, it must be resolved at the state level. So very important to have this Hindu Endowment Board, Tanah Wakaf, Hindu, This is only we have it in Penang. And in the last general election, Pakatan Harapan, the current government, actually promised that they will set up Hindu Endowment Board in a number of states like Perak, Selangor, Johor, where states which have a lot of Hindus, So once it's under a Hindu Endowment Board, that means all temples will come under that. So first thing I think they have to do is do a simple auditing, how many temples are there. It's quite easy to do. The land office will be able to do. Selangor in 2008, what they did was when they came to power, Pakatan Rakyat, they gave a period, 1 month for all the people there, all those having temples. They have to fill up a form and submit it. They say if you don't fill up the form, and then we will consider that you are an illegal temple, you will come and we can demolish. So many people, after they get these forms, then they decide which is temples, which have been there for long historically. So in Selangor, they say temples which are more than 100 years should be allowed to stay where they are. Okay, they should try to give them the land. Failing which, if there's a road coming up or something, then they should be relocated. Temples after, before the year 2008, they should be considered, if they have a long history, they should be considered relocation. And new temples, don't give them permission, demolish them the minute you get a complaint. So that was the position of the Selangor government, which I think is quite good. You need to do an auditing. You need to know which are the temples. Don't lump all the temples into one. Lump it with more than 100 years, maybe temples post Merdeka, pre Merdeka, you make some classification. And then, illegal factories, they call it process pemutihan.
Regularization.
Yeah. So similarly, even migrant labor, undocumented, you can be process pemutihan. The government will say, okay, we will allow. Similarly, do it to temples, and.
Okay. Aru, what's stopping other states from adopting similar practices like the Selangor temple policy?
I think firstly there's no political will. And every time an issue comes up like that, uh, Indian politician will support the Hindu temple and the Muslim politician will support Muslim. So in 1947, when the Putra AMCJ was trying to form the constitutional rakyat, perlembagaan rakyat, they had what they call it a board, where there are, all religions are sitting in a board. So when there's a religious conflict, you go there and it could be resolved. So similarly, you should have a board. Any case, like for us, like Indrani, the conversion case, all these cases become very serious racial issues. You know, people love different religion, then they divorce, and then they fight over custody. It is a family matter, but today it become a nation issue, national issue. So I think those kind of issues, similarly to temples or similar issues, should be resolved. So at the federal level, or they can form committees, boards, which all disputes you have, like a tribunal, you go there. You don't go to the media, you don't go to the TikTok, you don't go to WhatsApp, you go to this group, go there, talk to them. They should have all religion people there, and they should be able to find a problem. And this is what I did when I was a counselor in Kajang. Sometimes neighbors fight over an issue of having a dog, okay, or sometimes about cooking. And you don't need to go to the internet. You just have to call some elderly people in that area from both religions, sit in a room, and then resolve the problems. It could be done. Not a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. Aru, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I appreciate your time. S Arutchelvan there from PSM. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about the recent controversy around land ownership and the legal status of temples in Malaysia. What would a fair, lawful and sustainable approach look like for Malaysia in addressing this long-standing issue? Joining me on the show now is Latheefa Koya, who's the co-advisor to Lawyers for Liberty. Latheefa, thank you for being on the show with me. I'm wondering whether you agree or think that whether at the heart of this controversy is a question of legality. And if so, from a strictly legal standpoint, what determines whether a place of worship is quote-unquote lawful or unlawful in Malaysia?
Okay, in fact, I would think it's actually otherwise. It's not actually about legalism, although they try to hide it by saying that, oh, it's not about racism, it's not about religious discrimination or whatever. It is actually the legality of the so-called temple. Which is, when someone wants to say something racist, they usually say, I'm not racist, but, and then they can carry on. So that seems to be the case. It's actually not only it's racist, it's hurtful, the way that they have been using the word kuil haram. The issue of whether a temple, or for that matter, any other structure, being built on places or not having license. It really depends. It's quite complex because it's not a straightforward situation where they are talking about all temples that are considered illegally built, because there are many types of temples that are being built, and what is the history or the background of it that needs to be taken into account. So of course, one is if a structure is built without permission, right? The local authority have not given them the building permit. So just like if you're building a house, you still need permit to build on your own land a certain type or certain level of structure. If it is 2 stories or 3 stories, you need to get that building permit, and it goes through certain process. So similarly, what is the question, the issue that we're talking about? Is it because they don't have building permit, or are we talking about temples that are built on state land without permit? And then you'll have to also look at, are we talking about temples that are already on private land? And are they considered what the word they use now is penceroboh? Okay. So I feel that the recent outburst on the temples that they're talking about, somehow it is about temples that have been on state land, who then have alienated that land to a private individual or a organization, and eventually that owner, the new owner of the land, claims that the temple is illegally there. So who is the penceroboh actually? Because, for example, let's start with the Masjid India Temple, right? The Masjid India Temple, which have been there. Okay, we shall not dispute whether it's 100 years or decades or whatever. The point being, it was on state land, and that the temple is visibly there. It's not like hidden, it's there clearly. And when the new owner took over, they knew very well that the temple was there. So you can't say that the temple is the penceroboh. In fact, that particular temple have asked for that land. They have offered to buy that land, but it was never given to them. And so when you sold that land to another person, that person now claims that this is my land. Yes, legally speaking, yes. But you actually say that they are penceroboh and haram in that sense?
So, Latheefa, just to clarify, if temples or places of worship are built on state land and the state does not actually do anything to address it for many years and decades, does that reflect a fault in the governance for the agency itself?
Yes, because what happens is this: it's not just about temples, but many structures are built on state land. When the state is not using that land, all kinds of things can happen. People can sell, open a shop, kedai makan, or whatever. And then over the years, they have actually given value to that piece of land. So it could be houses, it could be kampongs. And, for a while, they used to call those houses setinggan, which means they duduk secara haram, right? But in reality, they are actually pioneers of that land. And we used to then say that do not call them kampung haram or setinggan. They are actually peneroka bandar, because they open that land. It could be bushes, it could be hutan or whatever. Then they basically open that land, clear the land, and gave value to that land because people are starting to live there. And then one fine day, the government decided, hey, we need that part of that land, right? And so then they will plan to take it back. Now all that have to go through a process. So they can't just come and break the houses, or in this case a temple, you can't just come and break it, because you need to give notice and monies have been spent. So you also have to compensate to the structures and whatever that you have spent on that particular building. So that has been the case for all the housing areas and kampungs and all that. So in the case of the temple, for example, uh, not only you can't just break it because they have spent money or to build structure or whatever, but you also have to take into consideration that it is a sacred uh, piece of structure for another someone else's faith. So I think, those so-called warriors who are going on this Kuil Haram thing, I think they mistakenly understood the word of God, I would say, when they say that you cannot, for Muslims, you cannot have idolatry, right? It is against Islam. But that is within your faith, within your religion. You don't go and break down somebody else's religion. You don't do that. And that is why there's specific Quranic verses that talk about yours unto your faith and ours unto our faith. We'll believe in ours and you believe in yours. It's been repeated, and there's many that says don't mock other religions, because then they will mock you back. And so when someone starts mocking about, for example, Taipusam procession, it will hit you back when you are doing the Hajj. There are rituals involved where if you do not have that faith or belief, it will look ridiculous to someone who doesn't believe. Like, for example, the ritual of stoning the devil. That's something sacred to your religion. So you do not mock others, because it will mock you back. So coming back to this legality, when you actually go and break the temple, there are actually laws which is that is provided for, where you cannot do that. That is under the penal code, where it will affect a community, or the faith of community, section 295, for example. So there are these laws. So how do you balance between section 295 and the legality of the land? Right. So those are the issues that need to be taken into consideration. Okay. So again, they use the word pencurobo. Technically speaking, in the case of, for example, the temple in Rawang, which also exploded, the temple was there since the 90s, and it was on the state land, and the state then sold that land to an individual, and that individual, so the temple was there, if I'm not mistaken, late 90s or 2001 or something like that, and then the land was sold in 2018 to an individual, and from 2018 they sold it to this Yayasan Kubra. And when Yayasan Kubra took over, now they turn around and say the temple mencurobo. That's not factually right. So to say that there is this deliberate attempt to build temples on someone's land is actually very unfair. And so that whole sentiment, that emotion that comes along with it, I would say it's orchestrated. It's created to create a sense of I don't know whether it's for viral purpose, social media, anything. You create fights, you create anger, to cause that. Because at the end of the day, one needs to look back at the cultural differences on how one views their place of worship. For Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, the mosque is built around the community, right? The mosque is within that community, and we use that mosque for meetings, and there is a minimum number of people that needs to be there for it to be called a mosque. So you need you if there is less than 40 people or something, you cannot actually call it a mosque. It will be a surau. So too many mosques is not a good thing. Okay, too many mosques is not encouraged, because you want as many of those community to go to that particular mosque. Okay, so is churches as well. This is where you go for classes, you go for weddings, marriage, there's halls, all kinds of things happen around the mosque. But that is not the case for Hindus. Hindus, you don't hear people going to the same temple based on the fact that you are from that area. Okay? That's not the culture. For Hindus, they go by that particular god, for example. Or there is a Sivan temple, there is a Kali temple, there is various names for temples, Krishna temple, and so that is why you see temples being built under a tree, or a lot of temples are built in a cave, because it's not about a worshipping place like the mosque or the church or Buddhist temple, for example. So that's where they get confused, because they look at it from their own perspective, their own prism, and they don't see what it is for the Hindus. For them, it is a temple that I built for God, which is a very different concept from Muslims. A place to pray, a place to learn, and a temple that they built for God. It's like a house of God for them. So they would probably get some, from their own perspective, I may have dreamt that there will be a temple here. So that is why you will see temples everywhere. But you cannot think that this is some kind of proselytizing from the Hindus, because the concept of proselytizing also doesn't exist in the Hindu religion. Unlike for Christianity, for example. Frankly, even Muslims ought not to have proselytizing. They confuse the word da'wah with missionary, because you cannot actually go and Christianize or Islamicize somebody. You can spread the good word, but one has to actually utter the faith on their own. You cannot do it on others. So this idea of taking children and then making them Muslims or converting them doesn't exist. But unfortunately, we have all these self-proclaimed heroes who think they're doing something, like as if they're part of a crusade. Even that, where is it coming from? Because they forget Islam equals to peace. That's the word Islam came from, peace. So to do things in a way which is hurtful, racial, it's so racially charged. It's very embarrassing. And I believe that, they don't know their own religion. What more to talk about other people's religion, And so this whole legal argument that they're talking about, it really depends on the context of history. You need to look at the history of how it came about. I'm not saying that all temples could be, according to the law or whatever, but there are definitely situations where, especially the ones that has gotten into the news last few weeks, are actually, like for example, the Dengkil temple.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there for decades in
Right.
the 60s, and then somebody took over. There's no way, based on the policy, there's no way that they would be able to get that land to themselves,
Right.
even if they had applied, So that's part of the problem.
I
that we-
understand. Latheefa, I want to thank you for reminding us that so much of this discourse that we're seeing online is actually manufactured hate and tension. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, especially around the legality of the issue. Thank you for your time. That was lawyer Latheefa Koya from Lawyers for Liberty, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.